Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening for some of you, and welcome back to this new Analyst Thursday webinar. Today, we're going to talk about smartphone and more precisely about how the iPhone continues pushing for more innovative solutions. To do that, as you can see on your screen, 6 experts in the imaging and display field from Your Intelligence and Your System Plus will be discussing this topic with you. I will give the floor in a few seconds to Zim Bouhamri. He will guide you during the webinar. So please, Zin, let's start the webinar.
Thank you, Hélène. Welcome, everyone. My name is Zin, Team Lead Analyst for Imaging and Display Activities at Your Intelligence, and I will be your host for today's event. The latest iPhone 15 has shown yet newer technology choices, and as we have been tracking what has been done in the past, we are also constantly working alongside the industry to better grasp what are the trends to anticipate for the smartphone market in terms of applications, technologies, and supply chains. I will be accompanied by many analysts that have been introduced to you before. Bear in mind that everything you will see here is based on several 200 pages long reports that we have available for you, and we will sum that up at the end. Coming to the topic at hand, when we look back at the smartphone industry since the very beginning, we noticed that the great battle between the OEMs has always been around the brand differentiation. If you look back in the day, one of the first elements of the phone that could help to do so was the display. Samsung, through Samsung Display, has been the leading provider of OLED panels and has long dominated for the smartphone brands through such panels. OLED penetration, now it has been steadily increasing in smartphones, and nowadays every flagship is using an OLED panel. Literally every. Apple switched to that in 2017 with their iPhone 10, but we hear now that they have been working on a newer display technology to disrupt the supply chain and avoid being dependent upon Samsung, or now with other smaller volume suppliers like LG Display or BOE. MicroLEDs have been a hot topic for a while now, ever since 2014, when Apple acquired Luxview. We have here Raphael, display analyst at Your Intelligence, who will share some insights on the MicroLED technology and whether or not it could be applied to smartphones, and when should we expect that. Raphael, please.
Thanks, Zin, for the introduction. As you mentioned, MicroLED is a very trendy technology, at least on trade show, and there are reasons why. So first of all, unlike LCD, it's a self-emissive technology. It means that the level of contrast can be theoretically infinite. But unlike OLED, which is also self-emissive, MicroLED is inorganic. So it means better reliability, lower power consumption, and also higher brightness. And this is a very important ally in reducing the price, actually, because the price is mainly driven by the semiconductor usage. For green and blue emission, it will be GaN, and for red, well, for red, there are not only already a consensus, but it will be between AlInGaP or InGaAs. So by reducing the die size, we would reduce the die cost. And following the roadmap we expect for the cost of a QHD phone, we expect that 2028 will be the starting point of its penetration in at least high-end flagship smartphone. So with these empty spaces we got in the end, we can fill the empty room with new features in order to address other functions than displaying the image. Some of them are already existing in current OLED-based phone, like, for example, touchscreen in the cover glass, or fingerprint recognition under the display, or even face recognition in the notch. And in the end, we would end up with a phone with even more features, but without any notch at all, which is very differentiating. So to give you an example of the kind of feature we could find in such a device, Osram, which is, we expect, to be a very important player as a chip maker in the ongoing MicroLED supply chain, provide this prototype with near-infrared photodiodes in between the pixels to get the gesture from the user with a distance around 20-30 centimeter, which is enhancing a lot the user experience. So this technology will also rely on flat optics and neural network computing, but keep in mind that all of this technology need to be mature when MicroLED is as well, so by 2028. So there's time for them to be ready. Now we have dreamed enough. Let's get back to the reality and what is now. So I won't get into the details of MicroLED technology since it's not the topics of today's webcast. But just to give you some order of magnitude, here I put on the slide the cumulative investment we expect in 2023, 25, and 27. So as you can see from the pace, it's really emphasizing the fact that the technology is still very young and need improvement to perform, and the part of R&D is still very large in the investment. To be honest, now there are not many products using the technology. There is the very expensive TV from Samsung, around $100,000 for a TV set, not for everyone. Some early generation micro display for AR, and we expect the first supply for the watch to be done by the end of the year, not for Apple one, but for some luxury brand by a panel maker from Taiwan, AUO. So let's get back to the cumulative investment we expect by the year on 2023, about 11.2 billion. Among these, Apple already spent 2.3 billion, and they are still not quite close from having their first product ready. So it gets us back to the Apple roadmap dealing with the technology. They are still in setting up the supply chain phase, dealing with the panel maker, the chip maker, etc. And they should get into the manufacturing phase around 2024 to commercialize their watch in 2026. So this is only the first step, because by this time they intend to optimize the process and design as well in order to make what we discussed earlier possible for the phone. So in the end, it's very uncertain and quite far in the horizon. So it shouldn't be a commercial product before 2028. So now I give back the words to my colleague, who will talk about more current trends in the smartphone.
Thank you, Raphael. So display innovation is going strong, and we are looking forward to this first smartwatch, and hoping it comes to term, because it will show a strong sign to the industry that micro LEDs are real, and it's probably going to create a strong momentum within the whole industry. Now, if I look back at what you showed from AMS Osram, you were talking about integration within the display and 3D sensing and everything. So again, coming back to when I was talking about 2017 with the iPhone 10, Apple came with the OLED panel, and they also introduced a brand new technology based on 3D sensing that they call the Face ID. Apple has been at the forefront of 3D sensing development, be it on the front or on the rear of smartphone, whereas Android OEMs seem to have led that on the side slightly these past few years. And I would like to ask Axel, the imaging analyst at Your Intelligence, to tell us a bit more about 3D sensing in smartphones and what we can expect for the future. Please, Axel.
Okay, so thank you, Zin, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about 3D sensing in the world of smartphones. So first of all, let's have a look to the applications of 3D sensing. So Zin talked about the Face ID. So the Face ID is a module that we can find at the front side of the smartphones. And the main application for that is easy phone unlocking and secure payment. This is based on a structured light. Then we have several different modules at the rear side of the smartphone too. Apple introduced in the iPhone 12 Pro the LiDAR camera at the rear side of the smartphone. So this is a high-resolution DToF device to be able to do some augmented reality applications. And in the world of Android phones, we can find this kind of device. So it's a laser autofocus. At the beginning, it was a single photodiode. The goal of that is to perform autofocus actively and also to have a possibility to enhance the photography, the quality of the pictures, and have post-processing bokeh, for example. And nowadays, we see that players are integrated more multi-zone DToF array. So it's a low resolution device at the border between the 1D and the 3D to have a better performance of such functionalities. On this slide, you can see the activity of the ecosystem around 3D sensing since 2016, 2017. So in this diagonal, you can see the different players involved in the sensor manufacturing. So mainly PMD, STMicro, Omnivision, Sony, Samsung, AMS, etc. And the smartphone brands that were involved also in 3D sensing. So what is interesting to highlight is that at the beginning, so the first big move from the industry was the adoption of the Face ID in 2017 by Apple. And then the Android brands started to follow the trend with a very active development between 2018, 2020. And progressively, it started to be removed, or there started to be a lack of interest maybe from the Android world for such technology. So nowadays, in 2022, it remains Apple mainly with the Face ID, so the structured light module. Apple also on the DTOF rear side device with the LiDAR camera. There are few remaining iToF devices in some Android brands like Huawei or Honor. And finally, something which is still trendy in the Android world is the DTOF multi-zone array. With, for example, so this is provided by STMicroelectronics and AMS mainly, and some brands like Samsung, Xiaomi, or Huawei or Honor are still using this kind of devices. As a consequence of this activity, so here you have the share in shipment of a 3D sensing module in the world of Apple versus the world of Android. So we saw that started to 2020, 2021, the share from the Android world started to decrease. And now in 2022, we estimate that Apple drives a bit more than 85% of the shipment of 3D sensing modules worldwide. Few numbers. So here, the forecast extracted from our latest report on 3D sensing module. So we tried to do a breakdown of front side versus rear side. So we remained optimistic on the front side, considering that maybe it's not dead. Android phone will still go again in the 3D sensing to be competitive with Apple, for example, on this kind of functionality. So with this optimistic scenario, that will drive a 3.4 compound annual growth to reach almost $3 billion in 2028. At the rear side of the smartphone, the growth is higher, and this is driven by the multi-zone detector array that we just introduced before. So here, it's still the growth is expected to reach 4.5% compound annual growth. Few words on the technology trends of 3D sensing. So the first thing I would like to talk to you is the metasurface. So metasurface is a class of diffractive optics. So it's a flat optics. So in the latest module, so the DTOF multi-zone array proposed by STMicroelectronics, there is a metasurface embedded inside. So this is for DTOF multi-zone array. And we can expect this type of component to spread also in modules like Face ID, for example, and the goal being to have a more compact module. So to replace progressively the different optical elements of the module, for example, the diffractive optics and the collimating lenses, to reach a really, really small form factor, like you can see on this graph. The last innovation that has been also trending this last years is the introduction of shortwave infrared. So the idea is to switch the operating wavelengths of the active 3D sensing from near infrared to shortwave infrared with a number of advantages. So Ali will talk about this later. For example, there is this concept from STMicroelectronics that has been introduced in 2021 publicly for the first time. It's the quantum dot based image sensors. So here the idea is to deposit quantum film which is sensitive to shortwave infrared. And as a consequence, there is a quantum efficiency of the detector, which is sensitive near 1.4 micron, which is the targeted wavelengths for 3D sensing applications.
Great. Thank you, Axel. And by the way, since we've just heard of the release of the latest iPhone, let me introduce you to Peter, imaging analyst at Your System Plus, where he keeps staring down and analyzing everything that is happening in smartphones. Peter, have you noticed anything new, anything in particular on your latest investigations regarding this 3D sensing topic, for example?
Thanks, Dean. So latest really is the key word here, because if we look back to Axel's design win history figure, the landscape has really changed in the past couple of years. So we at System Plus, who do for your group the device level analysis, we released a big 3D imaging comparative report back in 2020, and we had so much to talk about because 3D imaging was all the rage in smartphones back then, and everybody had their own idea of how it should be done. Now it's 2023, and what's still around? Well, the DTOF multi-zone detectors are there, and all the big Android players. It's sometimes called laser autofocus because it's used mostly to support photography in the rear cameras. So last year we put out full reports on the ultra premium offering from the two big players, AMS, STMicro, and these are still relevant. But today let's talk about Apple, because both their LiDAR module and Face ID module have recently been redesigned for the iPhone 15. The change is definitely most drastic to the LiDAR module. The SPAD CIS has become much smaller, although superficially it seems to be the same 10 micron SPAD pixel from Sony. We'll find out if that's true when we get to our cross-sectional analysis later this year. The emission side is also now much more compact, with the emitter apparently sitting directly on the unpackaged driver. More closely at the emission part, there's some kind of roof sitting on the emitter, which is probably one or more gallium arsenide pixels, the emitter. So at this point, we still have a lot of questions, and we're looking forward to analyzing this more deeply for you. Moving on to the Face ID module, seems to be essentially the same as the iPhones 13 and 14, but now we see where they integrated a proximity sensor.
Okay, that's great, Peter. Thank you. So talking about the proximity sensor, there's been a lot of let's say, rumors and hype about the kind of material that was used and the kind of wavelength that was used. So for that, I would like to introduce Ali, our compound semiconductor analyst, who should be able to tell us a little bit more about what happened in terms of the material chosen, or the ones that will be chosen, and what impacts it could have on the compound semiconductor industry. Ali, if you would please.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Dean. So first of all, I would like, before going into the details of what materials are used in this kind of light sources, I would like first to remind our audience why and where sphere light sources are essential. So if we look at this graph here, we can see that the sun irradiance becomes extremely low at 1380 nanometer, which is, by the way, the sphere wavelengths. And that allows to increase the performance of your sensors, right? So for example, in applications in smartphones, if you put your sensors here under the display, light can travel easier through the glass, so it absorbs less and the signal to noise ratio is higher. This allows you to have a bigger display area, so no notch can be used. The second application is the rear side of the phone. So it can be used in AR, VR applications. And the importance of using sphere here is in outdoor conditions, in different weather conditions, and it allows also longer detection range, and most importantly, is eye safe. Now, to come back to the compound semi materials used in sphere light sources, we identified it's either indium phosphide compound semi material or gallium arsenide. Here, I would like to stress the fact that gallium arsenide sphere light sources are still in early R&D, and from now on, when I say sphere light sources, I mean by it indium phosphide. So now if we look at the evolution of these compound semi materials with different applications, we can see clearly for gallium arsenide first, it was mainly dominated by datacom applications on 4-inch substrates. But when Apple decided to deploy gallium arsenide VCSELs for 3D sensing in 2017, we have seen the whole gallium arsenide industry transitioning to 6-inch substrates because the volume of this application is enormous. And as Rafael mentioned earlier, we are seeing also gallium arsenide microLED, which means that Apple now is pushing the industry to use 8-inch gallium arsenide substrates. As the competition today is fierce between substrate players to be in the supply chain of Apple. Now, if we look at indium phosphide, the situation is completely different. So indium phosphide still dominated by datacom and telecom applications on 3-inch substrates. And as we've seen earlier in 2022, that indium phosphide is already in consumer applications driven by Apple again, but it's only on 3-inch substrates. I strongly recommend our listeners here to go and visit and read our reports to understand why 6-inch substrates, indium phosphide substrates, are not here yet. Now, to come back to the proximity sensor story. So last year, we speculated at Yole for some time that indium phosphide will be used in proximity sensors. And we were correct. So what happened last year, Apple put this proximity sensor under display, and this allowed them to reduce the notch size. But what happened later, we have seen this year that in 2023, that Apple moved to gallium arsenide again. So to understand why this happened, Yole System Plus have done the teardown first on the 2022 model, on the iPhone 14 model. And what we have seen is that we have confirmed the indium phosphide materials in Apple smartphones. And then we have done our analysis, and we have seen the high cost of these light sources, which was about $3, about 10-fold higher than gallium arsenide, gallium arsenide proximity sensors. And again, if we look at the supply chain of indium phosphide, we can see that Coherent, which is a vertically integrated player, is the main supplier of this proximity sensor. But since the supply chain of indium phosphide is not mature for consumer applications, Coherent, for example, had to outsource the epi wafers from Landmark, which is not the case, for example, today in gallium arsenide proximity sensor, because Triumph and Coherent are vertically integrated. They have mature supply chain for consumer applications, so there is no need for outsourcing. Add to that, this indium phosphide proximity sensor in 2022, it's an edge emitter laser, so it has to be integrated in a perpendicular to the substrate in a vertical way, which is a complicated integration, which is not the case, for example, for gallium arsenide VCSELs if you put them like just on top of the ASIC. Now, we're saying that this year, Apple used gallium arsenide again for, first of all, the immature indium phosphide supply chain, high cost, and add to that, that we think that in 2022, that Apple were not ready to integrate the gallium arsenide proximity sensor within the Face ID module. So it's a question of packaging that we think this year has been solved. And this brings us now to the forecast. If we look at what happened in the substrate market for indium phosphide and gallium arsenide. So here, for example, I want to focus on the blue marine color here, which is a consumer application. So we see with indium phosphide 2022 and 2023, we have seen the adoption of indium phosphide substrates. But after that, in 2024, 2025, it will disappear. And then we expected it might come again, maybe with AR, VR applications for sphere light sources, maybe in 2026 and beyond. But if we look at gallium arsenide, the situation is completely different. So gallium arsenide, the volume of gallium arsenide substrates in consumer application is enormous, is huge, and it's driving the gallium arsenide market. So as of today, we can see that gallium arsenide is still the material of choice for consumer applications, and Apple is driving it. So that's all from my side. I would give back the mic to Zin. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ali. I would like to come back to Peter because you said there was a slight difference between the 22-23 version, indium phosphide versus gallium arsenide. Peter, have you noticed this in your device level investigations with the latest iPhone?
Yeah, what Ali says about the two material systems matches what we've seen. So Apple switched from their indium phosphide proximity sensor back to a gallium arsenide without giving up any screen real estate. They did this by integrating a gallium arsenide-based proximity sensor into their Face ID module right alongside all the facial recognition components. So it looks like in our module, we got the coherent sourcing. We see the Trump one, what we opened up. So it looks like Apple had to overcome some packaging challenges here. The light blocking wall has to snake around to insulate the detecting bits from the emitting bits. And the sensor, both the SPAD array and the VCSEL, are quite a bit larger than the previous gallium arsenide solution by STMicroelectronics. that we saw back in the iPhone 13 and before. This is probably because the light path is now so much longer since it has to travel all the way up the emission barrel alongside the Face ID optic. It's not a typical light path for proximity sensing. So we'll put out a full technical and reverse costing analysis in a future report, but it's already pretty clear that this solution is far less costly than the previous EMP-based module. In fact, integrating into this module means that they don't have to deal with the particular challenges of under-display proximity sensing. For example, we recently looked at two combination under-display proximity and light sensors from the Samsung flagships. Here they are side by side with the light blocking structure removed, so you can see the components inside. They both rely on multiple VCSELs because they need to cycle through them to avoid concentrating too much energy into the OLED, which absorbs like 90% of the light. And the iPhone solution doesn't have to deal with this, right? Because it shines through the dynamic island. So also both of these have integrated ambient light sensors, which is a pretty good idea when you're in a maybe bright, maybe dark room, trying to detect a weak signal through an active OLED that's also producing its own light. So it's not a simple problem. And if following a winding road, it looks like Apple has come up with a pretty decent solution.
Thank you, Peter. And we've only been talking about proximity and 3D sensing, but I heard a rumor about a new kind of imaging sensor for the main camera that had been developed by Sony and maybe incorporated in the latest iPhone. Do you have any physical analysis to share with us?
So yeah, that's the rumor. So we have the iPhone 15, and our analysis of the new image sensors haven't yet confirmed the presence of this technology, but it's rumored that one or more of the new cameras in the iPhone 15 series is powered by Sony's new XMOR-T technology. So this new generation of image sensor, it uses two transistor layers for each pixel. So the objective is to solve a fundamental problem in CMOS image sensors, which is how do you keep shrinking the pixels while overcoming the downsides of overly small transistors? So as one might expect, smaller pixels come with some downsides, such as hurting the signal-to-noise ratio, limiting light collection capacity. So pixel designers have to play with parameters such as transistor size, photodiode shape, circuit layout, to strike the balance between pixel size and pixel performance. So one way out of this dilemma, one of Sony's ideas, is to distribute the pixel transistors between two stacked layers, which gives you more space. You can make your transistors larger. Here's the XMOR-T structure that we've observed in the latest Sony Xperia, which is the first smartphone confirmed to use this technology. You can see the two transistor layers. We call them CIS1 and CIS2. They're contacted to the metal layers via these plugs, tungsten plugs. And then these metal layers connect the pixel circuit. As of this reporting, we've not confirmed whether the XMOR-T technology is present in any of the iPhone 15, but this full report on the sensor in Xperia should be out this week. In addition, we regularly release smartphone camera comparison reports, and of course, with the release of the iPhone 15, our next installment will surely be Apple's cameras.
Thank you very much, Peter. This brings me to the end of the story here. Remember how during the introduction I mentioned that in the past OEMs were trying to differentiate themselves through displays? Nowadays, we know that every flagship has an OLED panel. So how do they differentiate themselves? Have you noticed what they've been pushing for a lot in terms of advertising to differentiate themselves from one another? Yes, that exactly follows what Peter showed us. It's imaging capabilities. Better photos, better videos. But what's the reality of this imaging business for smartphones? And what can we expect from that industry going forward? So I would like to introduce Florian, Senior Imaging Analyst at Your Intelligence. We share about image sensor and camera module technologies and markets. Please, Florian, if you will.
All right. Thank you very much, Jean, for this introduction. All right, so I propose you to give you a brief insight on this imaging camera module market. So what are we speaking about? What does a camera module for imaging consist of? So as you can see here on the upper left, an imaging camera module consists of many components. First, you have the image sensors, that is the photosensitive part. And we mainly find the actuating parts
that help to move the optics versus the imaging sensing parts, serving features such as autofocus or optical imaging stabilization to help improve the image quality. And you have the optics lenses as well, that consist of many pieces of lens, mainly plastic lenses, even if we saw recently some first introduction of glass lenses as well that are much costly. You have many other sub-components like flexi, rigid substrates or connectors as well. And last year, more than 5 billion units have been shipped for the mobile imaging camera module markets. As you can see here on the left, the main contribution of the imaging camera module cost is image sensors, which is actually the semiconductor part contribution. And then you have the lens set, which accounts about 15%. You have the actuating part that represents about 10%, and 23% are associated to the module assembly and the other materials contribution, including the margin operated by camera module manufacturers. If we look at a broader scale, so here on the upper right, you can see the representation of the whole compact camera module business, the industry, including all the applications that, of course, we will not detail today. But beyond other applications such as automotive cameras, computing, tablets or laptop cameras, other consumer applications such as drones or personal robotics, medical diagnostics, including endoscope or industrial application, you have the huge part that is represented by mobile imaging application that account for more than 71% of the market. So this contributes to more than $25 billion revenues in 2022. And we expect that it will increase to more than $31 billion revenues by 2028. All right, so if we look even at a higher level scale, we also follow the prediction for the smartphone total production forecast by 2028. What happened last year is we encountered more than 10% decrease of the total smartphone production units. It decreased to below 1.2 billion units. And for the next year, we expect more than 10% decrease of longer term shipments. So this is mainly due by the slowing of the replacement rate of the smartphones that affect the longer term shipment for these products. If you look on the right, this is the evolution of the average numbers of camera per smartphones. So we observe in the past few years, the constant increase of the average numbers of camera per smartphone, particularly on the rear side of the smartphones. Today, it's about 2.8 cameras, so 279% penetration rate. And this penetration rate should increase further above 300% by 2028. You have also in yellow the penetration of smartphone front cameras, because in the front you can always encounter one camera at least, but sometimes you encounter even two cameras, including what has presented Axel, 3D sensing cameras in some iPhone products, for example. However, there is a deceleration of the increase of these average numbers of camera per smartphones. And this is what we observed on many camera models and brands. So finally, where should the imaging camera growth come from? So we performed a detailed survey analysis over many smartphone brands and models, and we took into account a large price range from low-end, mid-end, high-end until premium and flagship models. And we perform a detailed analysis about all the imaging camera modules pricing and contribution to the market. And this is the evolution of 2020 versus 2022 revenues in terms of revenues then. And we can clearly see that in 2020, the main revenues come from 8 megapixel, 20, 32, 48 megapixel resolutions. Whereas in 2022, we clearly see a shift towards higher resolution values, including 32, 48, and 64, and even 108 megapixels. On the left side of this graph, you can see the contribution of 3D sensing imaging devices, so lower resolution ones that have been presented by Axel a few minutes ago, and the revenues of global shutter associated to the Face ID solution has even increased as well. So this clearly shows that the market is transitioning to higher resolution products in the overall market value, but in a more general way, also it's transitioning to larger size and larger optical formats. We hear more and more about the 1-inch sensor in the upper, higher end models. And it's also transitioning overall to better image quality and higher priced image sensors as well. And what we should expect next. So in the roadmap, beyond the 3D sensing cameras that have been mentioned before as well, including Face ID or rear photography features, we should see also new sensing capabilities rising into the smartphones. First, there is the event-based imaging opportunities. So event-based is a new proposal to, briefly speaking, monitor only the pixels that change significantly their luminance to achieve, let's say, a low latency, an unprecedented low latency and low power sensing modalities. One of the most promising applications for mobile would be live deblur, and it has been advertised by companies such as Prophecy that have announced earlier this year a partnership with Qualcomm to introduce this innovation into the smartphones. Many other companies are working on this topic. So beyond Prophecy, there is Absentech, Sony, OmniVision, etc. So for sure, we should see in the really near future the introduction of this camera to further support the imaging quality. And there is new opportunities to expand the imaging camera modules in the smartphone markets. We could see in the later future, from 2026 or later, new sensing capabilities also in the smartphones, and that could include also multispectral cameras used for Face ID biometric, skincare, or accurate color photography as well. This is an important transition in the world emerging markets, including mobile, from imaging to sensing, and this will also sustain the multi-camera approach that has been slowing down for traditional photography, but that could be expanded further thanks to these opportunities as well.
Thank you very much, Florian. And with that all, that brings us to the end. As you've seen, there are many different technologies that are trying to push the boundaries further and further for the smartphone industry and possibly others. As I mentioned, every slide that you have seen today has been taken out of several of our reports. And here you can see the list spread over 2 different slides. So I will speak slowly so that you have time to look at those. And everything has been shown from YOL Intelligence and YOL System Plus. We hope this webcast has been insightful to you. Do feel free to reach out if you need help or have questions on these matters or anything. Here are the people you can contact for your needs. Thank you for listening, and until next time.
Okay, thank you, Zine, and thank you all the speakers. It was nice to get your input. In addition to that, I would like to highlight the YOL Group status of reports. They provide crucial and strategic insight into market dynamics, supply chain, technology roadmap, and also financial profiles, aiming strategic planning and industry dynamic understanding. You will find here the 3 ones you can choose for the topics we covered today. The webinar is now ending. Thank you all for your attendance. As you can see, the video replay and the PDF presentation will be available on our website, tomorrow. Feel free to get back to us for any questions. Let me remind you that the next Analyst Thursday webinar will be on November 9th. It will be the second part of the data center topic we had previously in June. Stay tuned for more information. Again, thank you all and see you soon.